This conference will now be recorded.
This conference is now being recorded. Welcome to MDG Premium, and we're starting off with our coronavirus woes. As far as I know, none of us have contracted the disease, but we are all feeling sick.
Well, I also say, Joe, you're prescient, because this is the way we're going to have to conduct all of our business forever now.
You know, I was having this argument, for what it's worth, I was having this argument with my son. I believe that this will be, like, as you look at timelines of technology adoption, I believe this is going to be a blip. This is going to accelerate that which would have happened anyhow.
Mm-hmm.
Andre, you were telling us about what coronavirus means to your business.
Yeah, and just following up on what Jonathan said just before we started the call, we had the initial impact, which was a direct impact from the circuit boards that we source from the near Wuhan, China, which is about 40 miles from there, the Guangdong area. And so that was an immediate thing where we had virtually 4 weeks of no supply. But then what Jonathan points out is that in the whole chain, there's a cascade effect. So that was direct. But then we have indirect things. For example, the cleaning materials that we use have a high alcohol content. So when we called our supplier, they said, well, we're going to have to put you on allocation. And so now we're waiting for alcohol to be delivered. And, so there's a number of things that occur that
the alcohol is needed for.
We have certain procedures for wipe downs that we do for some of our materials.
But is that alcohol being redirected to something sterilization related?
I guess, I don't know. Yeah, I would guess, because we use 99% alcohol. Perhaps they sell that to Purell. I don't know.
That's exactly where it's getting used. Yeah.
Is it, Ed? Yeah, because we were put on allocation for that. So
I had a talk with a supplier of sexual lubricants, and he said he was trying to convert his entire production line. Time out.
Oh.
Dangerous, what you might say. But he was trying to convert his entire production line to hand sanitizer because he has the capacity to do that. He couldn't get the supplies, just the certain components, in terms of the alcohol and things like that. So he's stuck with lube.
Well, I'm relieved.
But actually, my sister was telling me
for the next 6 weeks.
My sister was telling me 2 days ago that although they may be manufacturing a whole bunch of tests, there's apparently a global shortage on the reagents.
Find reagents for the slower among us.
The reagents are the chemicals that you need to actually process the test so that you can actually get a result.
You mean at the labs?
Yeah.
Here's the thing that I don't get about the tests. Say I get tested today and I'm fine. And I go outside and I get it. To me, this is like an ECG test. His heart was fine. The next day he had a heart attack.
True.
That's exactly right.
Anyone who wants to get tested, great. I got tested. I was like, hey, I'm fine. I went to a senior center. I contracted the disease. I came home and I infected lots of people. This test, I think it's like TSA. I'm checked.
No, there is a great value in not only testing people who are symptomatic, but actually getting a decent statistical sample of asymptomatic, because those are the carriers. And unless you have a decent handle on how much is already here, you won't be able to. You'll keep putting out fires, but you won't put out the forest fire.
You know a lot about this from your last job, no?
A decent amount, yeah.
Teach us a thing or two, real quick.
Well, about which aspect of it?
Anything. I mean, basically, I largely followed what you just said about asymptomatic, because it's a big word, but I don't really get it. I mean, you would be able to tell if I'm not showing symptoms, but I have it, and therefore I will quarantine myself. That's great for the people who have it. I'm saying for all the people who don't have it, what does that tell you? Okay, well, I don't have it today.
Okay, there's lots. Okay, so first and foremost, the core messaging is that people's behaviors are now only with decent communication from the top, which we're not getting yet. Still, it's very confused messaging. some people like Tony Fauci, for NIH, are telling the right things. This is serious. As soon as you're aware that you shouldn't be touching your face, of course that makes you want to touch your face, but when you go out, everyone should be a lot more conscious of not interacting with people the way you used to. Yeah. So that in itself will reduce those things, but it's never going to eliminate it completely. But like I say, if people are symptomatic, those people definitely should be getting tested, but a decent sampling around where you're seeing, like in Washington State, like in Seattle, in Boston, where there's a big conurbation around some Biogen thing, New York City, etc. But there ought to be some statistical sampling in every major city so that you can actually say, okay, we've got a low-level fire burbling along, and then if it's going to explode, you need to have some expectations on how to position your resources around those things. You can't get that unless you have a decent sense of how many people are out there.
Hey, Ed, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Just for us newbies, can you kind of compare and contrast the flu versus this? I mean, obviously there's a lot of unknowns. Some things are similar, some things are different. Help us understand.
Yeah. So this is a coronavirus which is in the same family as the common cold and SARS and MERS. Okay. Influenza virus is a different virus. It's been around for a long time. What's important about that is that the worst influenza outbreak was the 1917, 1918. But since then, several things have happened. It's been around long enough where enough people have gotten a certain amount of immunity, and it's been around long enough where every year the US government and governments around the world make an influenza virus vaccine. The tricky thing about viruses and virology is that viruses constantly, and rapidly evolve. So every year that you have the vaccine made for influenza, there's only a certain percentage chance that it's actually going to be effective. It may not be as effective, and again, it might be. Anyway, we don't have anything like that for this. The entire global population is apparently naive to this type of virus, this particular virus. The other important difference of this to certain others like SARS and MERS is that it is highly transmissible from person to person and is transmissible before you're symptomatic. And as you go through those sorts of things, those are some of the really scary parts of when you get global pandemics. Because they're, shutting down the borders at this stage is a completely useless exercise. Maybe 2 or 3 months ago, it might have had an impact, but now it doesn't. So timing is everything. Then the other element is how lethal this is. And again, so just to put things into comparison, the 1918 influenza, well, actually, sorry, let me back up. Normally, when people are killed by these types of things, it goes through the population in a U shape, okay, like this, okay, where the very old and the very young are most susceptible because they have the most compromised immune systems, or they haven't developed an immune system yet at the very young end. 1918 influenza had an N-shaped or an upside down U shape. And that's why it was so dangerous and why it killed a whole generation, as they say, the lost generation. This one seems to have actually almost a linear progression in terms of lethality. There haven't been that many reported of the young. It seems to be much more affected of the very old.
So it's only a risk to our presidential candidates?
Yeah, pretty much. And And given that our president seems to have been in close contact with people who have tested positive for the virus quite recently, you know, watch this space kind of thing.
This is a recorded call, so I won't say anything.
Ed, it sounds like what you're saying though with the testing, it's as much for the the government's it's information for them to understand where things are starting to progress and how things are spreading through the community, as much as it is information for the individual. It's actually getting tested. Is that true?
Absolutely. It's information, you know, for an individual person, that's, you know, nice for them to know, and then nice for their family members to know, because again, actually, anytime you get a positive, you then need to very quickly trace who they've been in contact with in the past week, because then you need to track those people much more effectively. This is, you know, in the situation in Tarrytown, New York, from a couple of days ago, they traced 50 cases from one guy, one lawyer, you know, go figure. Always blame lawyers. So yeah, it's much more trying to figure out what's going on in those communities and extending things out that way. If you're only testing just the people who are already symptomatic, again, you're fighting at the edges. You're not really looking at where the thing's going.
Does anyone else have Chuck, I'd like to hear from you, Mr. Patient Safety. You must have something about all of this that you'd like to share. Could you come a little closer to the camera so we can see?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you know, I've just been observing like everybody else and watching this thing unfold. I wasn't surprised, you know, when the patient safety conference that was supposed to be 2 weeks ago canceled. So the patient safety movement, as you know, turned into a meeting about the virus, and you invited everyone to attend that. But that when the conference was canceled, that's what took its place. Then the AORN, which is, you know, it's a huge meeting, you know, between 8,500 and 9,000 nurses and doctors all in one place. They were a time bomb. I was wondering when they were going to cancel. They were waiting until the last second, and they canceled. You know, imagine, if you will, if just a couple of people had contracted the virus and went back to an operating room where people have compromised immune systems, it just would have been a disaster. So they wisely canceled. They couldn't postpone it because the meeting is too big. No one else could accommodate them on short or long notice. So they're asking everybody to leave their money in place, and they're invited next year at a lower rate, et cetera, et cetera. I do some work for Boston Scientific. I'm supposed to be on a coaching call with a senior executive right now. He called me up and said, listen, we have an emergency meeting to talk about our plan to address the virus. What's our policy going to be? And the same thing with Sanofi. You know, I'm supposed to be at a meeting on April 20th. They have a rotating schedule for travel for 8 weeks out. If that one's canceled. So there's just, you know, being in this industry, you're just seeing, you know, one person after the other, one company after the other, you know, doing something about it and putting a plan in place. I've got a son who's an attorney, and you know, he's a grown-ass man. He makes a lot of money. He's a very successful guy. And when he was a kid, you know, he had asthma. And so imagine, you know, I had to go into dad mode on his ass this morning, just saying, dude, you know, you head the office, figure out a way to stay home. And he gave me a bunch of lame excuses, but he needs to stay home. He's right there in Oakland, for God's sakes. And you know, if you drive around Oakland, you'll see his picture on a billboard. Looks just like his dad, one handsome dude. No, but you know, we have to be cautious, because you know, we don't have the tests in place. We haven't been strategic about this. The virus is ahead of us and not behind us. Currently, there's Joe.
Carly, come on in. Oh, Carly, come on in.
She's on the way
I
out.
have to run off. to
No,
work.
say hi.
Good to
Give us
see
a
you.
good look. Let everyone see you.
Hi, Carly.
Hi, everyone. Take care. Good to see you.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay.
Oh, no. If you kiss one of us, you have to kiss all of us. Oh,
I couldn't even talk my own wife into staying home.
rude. That was
Was
rude.
that?
That was rude.
It was very rude of her to just come in and walk out like that.
No, and she kissed one of us
For
and not
safety,
all
it
of
should have
us.
been an elbow.
Oh, yes. Right. Yeah, let me try that. I'll be a dead man. She don't play that.
I
No,
wrote,
but hopefully we get past this. But the thing that's going to be the shocker is when we start testing, because as we all know, we've only got about 7,500 people nationwide tested. South Korea is testing, 12,000 people a day. Once we start testing, not in the pool of people with symptoms, that's behind the 8 ball. When we start testing people who need to be tested, we're going to find a skyrocketing number, and hopefully we have the leadership in place politically and medically to calm people from a panic when the real numbers come out, because we don't know what the real numbers are. So we're all going to be in shock, but let's realize that it's going to skyrocket once we get the tests in place. It's going to be a nightmare, and hopefully nobody panics too much and the whole society starts to, and economy gets even worse.
Does anyone have any clients that are really ahead of the game in this situation?
this is a good place for me to read out something that I shared with the group yesterday. And that is, let's see where I put it. One of my alumni from 10X wrote me, Landon Black. He says, we have access to COVID-19 antibody rapid tests and immunochromatographic assay with 15-minute results. Looking for interested parties in the US, any thoughts or ideas? And Rob Packard responded with someone that he knew. I'm hearing the echo thing, so I'm gonna mute people who aren't speaking, if I can. So I don't know if any of you have anything that they would want to do with that or can do with that. Okay, I'll leave it there, but if it comes to mind. Eddie, you were saying something?
Yeah, well, I mean, that sounds like something that is desperately needed. I just don't know, where best to put it.
Yeah, neither do I. Anyone else want to jump in about this topic, or we'll have Jonathan? Go ahead.
I'm supposed to, I have a new client in Denmark, in Copenhagen, Denmark. I'm supposed to go there the last week of April, so I'm kind of hoping that 30 days comes and goes and I can still make it. That'll be interesting to see.
It's so touch and go. It's like, technically, my conference hasn't been canceled yet. It will be. But technically, I'm like, if I can't get my $23,000 deposit back, do I do it? And just like go with my family and eat $23,000 worth of food? Or, whoever wants to show up, show up? Or do I postpone it no matter what? Like, I'm in this like waiting for them kind of thing. The right answer is it can't really happen. It's just not, it doesn't make sense, and it would send the wrong message too. Disneyland's closed, but Joe Hage is open. Come on over to San Diego, will be fun. I mean,
I'm curious what's going on in China though, because when we hear some reports of it going down, it's kind of hard to trust the quality of the information from China. But are we seeing the other side of that, of that curve in China? where it all started.
I'm wondering if this is going to be an annual thing too.
On clients and friends that are in China, I mean, they literally have people checking people at entrances to buildings. They have. He actually left China because of the concern, and then left Europe because he saw the difference in the way that they're executing in China, and decided that it was actually safer to go back.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, on China, I've got one data point, which is that 2 of my colleagues who were going to be going to China right after the Chinese New Year, we've been tracking this thing since before Christmas, and they decided to not go because it would have been right into the teeth of when it was getting very bad there, and it was really hitting the news. But just yesterday, my colleague received an email from a group that he was going to be presenting at in conjunction with the trip. And it sounds like they've rescheduled this thing that was going to be in February for sometime in May, it's looking like. So it does seem that the Chinese market for business meetings and conferences is opening back up. But, you know, it's a little slow. Here in Europe, I was supposed to be leaving a week from today for Amsterdam for a conference in urology that was canceled a week ago. And at first they said sometime in July. A couple of days ago, they've picked some dates, but they didn't sound that confident about those dates.
Yeah, and doesn't the warmer weather reduce the risk? Does it go down with the warmer weather as well?
That's what happens with the traditional flu virus and other things, but it doesn't happen with every one. And since we've never experienced this one before, nobody knows. But that's a hope, but it's not known.
Yeah, hope's not a strategy, right?
Exactly.
In what was released in China, or what happened, came out of it. My understanding is it came out of a lab, right? So it was a lab error or something. So they should have more information about it, right?
What, you mean the virus itself?
Yeah, virus out of the Wuhan lab. That's kind of what the Chinese said, right?
No, I mean, what I'd heard is that it had been evolved, if you will, in what are known as the wet markets in Wuhan, China.
That was the original. That was the original reporting from the mainstream media, I guess. But that's been discredited, and they've attributed it to a laboratory in Wuhan. I mean, the Chinese have reported that themselves.
Oh yeah,
yeah, that's true.
So I thought yeah. Anyways, I'll look it up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, CNN starts reporting before they had information, but they did trace it to the lab in Wuhan. It's related to bats, I guess, but anyhow, they should have more information on it. I'll share an article.
One thing that's coming out of China right now is they are actually publishing books saying that it actually came out of the United States. So I say that only to say that maybe the information coming out of China is not 100% reliable.
Yeah. Are we much better in the U.S. really?
Mm-hmm.
In this case, yeah.
Ken, will you tell us what's going on in Israel? Ears. Your microphone.
You got to unmute. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Oh,
Well,
that's right. You're in Amsterdam. You're not in.
I'm in Amsterdam. Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, I can tell you what's happening in Israel because we're constantly connected with what's happening back home. But I'm physically in Amsterdam. I could have met Ed maybe. Were you on your way to the urology, European Association of the Urology meeting?
Yeah.
So back in Israel, Israel is getting slowly into the mode of a lockdown. Basically, every person, no matter where from around the world, that arrives into Israel has to go to an immediate 14-day quarantine at home. They just announced today that all the schools are closed right until after Passover. Not allowed for meetings over 100 people to happen. So basically, all the museums, operas, weddings, etc., have been canceled, and the country is slowly going to a lockdown. We're hearing from family that people are stockpiling, concerned with toilet paper for whatever reason. I don't know. But I must say, I moved to Amsterdam for 3 months, I think around 9 days ago, hoping it will be a very nice 3-month endeavor. But it's growing to be difficult here. There were 200 people newly diagnosed as of yesterday, and 120 a day before that, and 111 day before that, and 80 the day before that. So that's growing. And it's slowly being, and people I try to, and obviously events and meetups that I scheduled for were canceled. I thought of doing a little bit of networking here, but mostly we're spending time indoors or on the bike, and occasionally, and sitting in cafes just to get out. But it's completely different than what we envisioned when we planned this small escape 3 months experience a year and a half back. So it ain't easy. It's I was actually a little bit skeptical about this whole thing. I thought that it was like blowing into out of proportion, but I'm slowly realizing that I was in the wrong. So that it is a thing, and it needs to be serious measures need to be taken worldwide, just like they've done in China, just complete lockdown on millions of people.
With perfect information
for it to disappear after a few weeks.
With perfect information now, if you had known then, would you have just blown off this entire Amsterdam thing and stayed home in Israel?
Possibly. Oh, well, I don't know. That's tough because it's like. Well, I think that at the moment I'd say no. I mean, I wouldn't have wanted to change the plans, but if it's going to continue spiraling as it has, then maybe I'll get to the point where I'll admit that it might have been a mistake. But Amsterdam's beautiful. I mean, it's a nice bike ride. It's cold, but it is beautiful. So we're enjoying that working from home. But I really thought that, I reached out to some people and say, let's meet. And they're saying, well, we're careful now. Let's just meet when it blows over. So people are cautious. I had to fly for work to the UK the day before yesterday, and I said, okay, I'll do that. It's like an Uber right to Schiphol to the airport, and then to Heathrow, and then to the client side by cab. So it's no big deal. Small planes. But I woke up at 5 a.m. to catch the flight, and then I saw a 12:30 a.m. message from a client who said, we're going to cover your sunk costs because of the airfare, but just don't come. Let's do it via Skype. People are afraid. Yeah. And mainly concerned for my parents and all the people of that generation. That's all the COPD patients. That's a little bit tougher. But
I wonder too, part of me, this is silly, I don't actually wish for it, but part of me wants to get the virus now so it gets through my system. And I'm wondering, foolishly of course, if like then I'll be immune, because it's like the chicken pox. I had it and now it's over, but I suspect there's a new viral strain every year, just as it is with the flu. Ed, your thoughts?
You will build up a certain amount of immunity. It depends, how much how much it evolves and from season to season. But you would certainly have immunity to this element. And again, getting it early is before all the healthcare systems get overwhelmed when everybody gets it later. I'm sure you've probably heard this in the past couple of days, how they're trying to flatten the curve.
I was thinking that too.
Fit within
Yeah.
the available resources that the healthcare systems have.
Yeah. Well, it's a good thought, Joe. Maybe you should just like walk the streets and just like ask people.
Well, you know, a century or two ago, they used to have pox parties, where
What?
when somebody pox parties.
Pox parties.
Yeah. Basically, when one child had chicken pox, you'd bring all the other kids there, and they'd all get together and just roll around in a room together, make sure they all got it, because if you get chicken pox when you're young, it's irritating and so on and so forth, but you get over it. But if you're older and you get chicken pox, it can be very, very serious, and you know, it can kill. So, and if you haven't had it before, you're naive to it, and you could get yourself in trouble.
In farm country, everybody had cowpox parties. Same reason. Cowpox was relatively non-serious as a disease, but it immunized you to chickenpox.
Mm-hmm.
How do you spell it? Pelpox?
No, cowpox, like for a cow.
Oh, cowpox. Okay.
Yeah, and yeah, that's where they first noticed it as well, because women milkmaids really never got chicken pox because they were around cows so much that they got it, and they get it mildly, but they had then gotten that immunity.
I wasn't at the beginning of this call. I'm sorry about that. Are you feeling it in your businesses? I mean, apart from travel, of course, like new work, clients are being very careful not to sign new projects.
Yes, we covered that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll look it up.
No, actually, before the call started, before the recording started, I railed for 20 minutes about the woes of my life. I don't think most people would ever want to watch it again. But the long and short of it is that first, I'm negotiating with Hyatt to get them to not charge me $23,000 to cancel the conference.
What, the 10X?
Yeah.
Holy shit, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, there's that. And then, let's see, there are 11 of you on the phone. If you each send me, I don't know, 2,000-ish, we'll be
I think it's 2,500.
Send a letter to Hyatt.
the other.
Another 2,000?
Hey, Leslie, thanks for joining us. The other is that Andre was going to potentially engage me to help him with his marketing. So I was like writing in all the zeros after the number in the front for how much he was going to pay me. And I just erased that line from my spreadsheet because he has parts coming out of Wuhan and his business is seriously affected, and he's not about to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on my marketing services. It's just not the time for it. So there's that. And is there a show of hands? Is there anyone in the room who's not being affected financially, save your whatever's left of your retirement savings, your business itself that has not been affected by this? Every one of us.
Yeah.
Sarah, anything you want to tell us about what's going on in the UK? How's your office handling it? Are you guys all going into the office, working more remotely? What?
Well, my office is in an area that seems to be have a larger number of people who have been tested positive in the UK. So it is a bit of an issue with schools and anything to do with children. We've been affected financially because a lot of companies are delaying signing up to buy our services because they don't know where they're going to be.
Right.
Nationally, it's quite an issue at the moment. We've had quite a steep rise in number of positive cases today, which is of concern. We seem to be escalating. Ed, I'm guessing you're still in the UK, but yeah, it seems to be a bit of an issue here. Today, we've had the biggest rise in number of positive cases. There's been a number of things they've cancelled. So sporting events have been cancelled. We had some local elections due. They've now been cancelled. 11 of our MPs are now being tested and are going to be self-isolated. And we've just had, I don't know if you've already discussed it, but that guy that Mr. Trump was standing next to has now been tested positive. So we're having quite a bit of an issue. And Spain have now announced an emergency state as well. So not just us, but yeah, it's not great in the UK and certainly not for us at the moment.
It's really, you know, when you think about it, it's obvious to say it's historic because I think we have to go back to the Black Plague in 1918 for something that's scared the shit out of the world. Only there was no internet or telephones, and everyone was like in the dark about what to do. And just
well, just to put things into a little bit more context, a little bit more recent. I mentioned it earlier in the call, but again, the 1918 influenza, which was known colloquially as the Spanish flu, actually had very little to do, in fact, nothing to do with Spain. What had happened then is that during World War I, Spain was neutral, but every other country that was involved in the World War, including the US, UK, Germany, France, everybody had censored their press. But because Spain was neutral, it was the only place that reporters could write about it, because Woodrow Wilson was concerned that it would, affect the war effort. So no one was getting any information out about this disease. And that accentuated things dramatically. At the very, very beginning of the coronavirus, China was being not as open and not as helpful, but they changed and they have been much more open, and that has been very helpful. So information is one of the best ways to fight this stuff. And that's, again, goes back to what I was saying earlier about testing and getting that information publicly known so that people can know where there are big conurbations and they can avoid them. And then also resources can be put in those places to treat people and address the situation.
I know, this is somewhat political rhetoric, and I confidently know that we have different party affiliations on the call, so I'll be very delicate about this. But Biden was saying that because of some of Trump's documented mistruths in the past, that what's coming out from him is being seen, by some people as, not the bedrock of truth, that might have come from kind of another leader, and that's not helping matters. I think from a political strategy standpoint, that can be a very effective lever in the upcoming election. And
Biden also said the primary was on Thursday.
I'm sorry, what?
Biden also said the primary was on Thursday.
Well, I mean, yeah. I'll just say that with the market having given back 100% of the Trump gains now, and the economy extremely shaky versus what seemed to be an unstoppable juggernaut, this could very well be a defining factor in political strategy and indeed in the elections itself. Because up until this, I thought that Trump was unstoppable. Thoughts, anyone? Okay.
Well, it's on one hand, everything, all the facts that you've said are accurate in terms of the stock market and everything like this. But I also think that we haven't heard the last thing from the stock market. And when I made the remark before about China actually publishing a book saying that the virus started in America and was part of an American plot. That was not a flippant statement. That book is actually being published
I'm
and
quite sure
translated.
this information about.
Well, no, this is from the Chinese government, and so that's the only reason why I would temper anything that comes out of there in terms of accuracy. We've got everybody reporting on the publishing of that book, left wing, right wing, everybody. So that is unprecedented. So I'm keeping my powder dry on that.
Well, again, actually, Rick, they might be actually trying to conflate things, because in fact, the 1918 influenza actually did originate in the U.S. What happened was the U.S., when mobilizing to get into World War I, brought together a huge number of young men from all around the country into a big training camp in Kansas, and each one of them brought with them their respective illnesses. The farm boys brought all the farm illnesses, and the city boys brought all the city illnesses, and it became this great melting pot. And that's where they created this, accidentally, of course, but they created this hyper virulent flu that actually was very specifically lethal to the people who it was bred upon, which is those young men, which is how you got that weird, N shape in the death curve, because it was, that virus was trained on exactly that population.
Yeah, I'll weigh in here, Joe. So I'm going to make a prediction. We'll see if I'm right in October. But here's my thought process. I think Trump's an opportunist, so he's going to take every opportunity to inject stimulus into the economy and pressure the Fed, and this virus will go through its course. My prediction is we'll have new highs in the stock market by September, October, and Trump will play that from the economic and stock market standpoint to his advantage. So that's my prediction. 30,000.
And therefore he will win because he.
Well, yeah, I'll probably win anyways. I think what we're going to see is this whole time period for the next month or however long it's going to be we're going to stimulate the heck out of the economy, and this thing doesn't seem like it's going to last as long as people are concerned about, and they'll keep going further. So yeah, I think it's going to be a lever against the Fed. So the Fed will end up dropping on Tuesday the interest rates.
Didn't they just do something yesterday?
Yeah.
I mean, I hope that economic stimulus is enough this time, but I don't know what's going to stimulate Andre to hire me if he doesn't have parts.
Yeah, but the whole economy on the global level is shifting to a different trading cycle, right? So the whole North American shift and the manufacturing back to the U.S., you're going to see a lot of other factors here. And this doesn't really work against that change. It works in favor of that change. But yeah, it works to the U.S. benefit and against China in terms of trading power.
I think that President Trump is showing his hand. I don't think he's got a leadership bone in his body. I'm all for the economy like anybody else. I mean, the healthcare industry has been very good to me. I can't complain one iota, and I'm enjoying the 401k and stuff that goes along with that. But what's going to come out in the wash, I think, is that we could have been ahead of this. And we should have been ahead of this. When it started to come up in December, we could have been ahead of the curve. Not everybody thinks about strategy. We talk about it on this call and among ourselves. And, what I learned about strategy, quite honestly, I learned most of it from my wife. We do a lot of work in strategy in the industry. And to think 3 years and 4 years and 5 years out in advance is a skill set. And I just think that, our reaction to the virus is not a good thing. Now, by the time the fall rolls around, I think knock on wood, hopefully the virus is going to be over and things will be back to normal and the stock market is going to take off and that's going to be great. I gotta wonder, is this President Trump's Katrina? And if it is, he's got time to do something about it. He's got time to stand in front of the camera and talk about the health of the nation instead of the health of the economy. Giving me a tax break is not going to make me go outside. It's not going to make me go to the movie theater. It's not going to delay great movies coming out until November. We're looking for leadership. President Carter, God bless him, he's still alive and kicking and being a great contributor. But man, as a president, that guy could give a woodpecker a headache. But when the oil crisis hit, he stood in front of the camera. We were wondering, what do we do? What do we do? And he came out with a bunch of things that got on our nerves. 55 miles an hour, give me a break. But he stood in front of the camera and he became a leader. And people in times of crisis, we're looking for a leader. We're looking for somebody who's not going to read the teleprompter, look like they're about to fall asleep, and call themselves a leader. Jimmy stepped up. God, he screwed up in so many other areas, but during a crisis, he stepped up. And George Bush, my wife likes to talk about George Bush, but when somebody whispered to him that the towers had been attacked, he went into leadership mode. We needed a leader, and he stepped up. I think Trump's got time.
I'm for open discussion, and forgive me, I'm the one who injected politics into this.
Yes, you did.
I did. It could derail quickly and alienate some of our members. So I'm a little skittish if the room is fine.
I don't think so, Joe. Joe, before you throw yourself under the bus, let me just share a real short story. Carl and I went on a boating trip down the Thames this summer with 3 other couples, close friends. And on the way to the airport, the Uber driver said, "Hey, where are you guys going with?" And we told him, we said, "Hey, we're good friends with these folks. We chartered a boat. Nobody's going to talk politics on the boat, just for safety." And he said, "Why not?" And I said, "Come on, politics and religion, it's in close quarters like that for 8 days. It's not going to be fun." He said, "If your friends don't know your political views, are they really your friends?" Bam.
Okay. Well,
can I ask?
I would say that I don't need all of my clients to be my drinking buddies, but I need their money. Right?
I think that's what some of the comments were about the economy, because a lot of times people are afraid of what they don't know, and there's a good number of things we don't know about this virus so far, but they're also afraid that they're not going to have enough money to pay their bills. Guys like us, girls like us, we have some money put away, but there are a lot of people who do not. They want to know what's going to happen to them. Are they going to go on government relief right away, or what's going to happen? So they want to hear things like that. Now I'm as ready as I can be, and my business has been affected. But since we don't know exactly everything about the virus, I would love to know what we're doing economically to try to prepare for this. And I think that was a very good thing. I think whoever did Trump's speech preparation and set that whole thing up should probably be doing some different job, because it really wasn't executed very well. But I guarantee, but of the 3 people we're having to choose to leave this country, and now you'll know my politics, Chuck, is that I think the only one with a chance of getting us through this in one piece is already the president. I don't think we need a communist, and I don't think we need a guy who says things and then has to retract them on a regular basis a few weeks later because they weren't true. And I'm not talking about crowd size, I'm talking about policy things. So I don't mind talking about politics, and I also don't mind saying let's not talk about politics. I'm okay with that too. But I think that there's more. I think that there's more going on that's good than than sometimes we want to admit, because we're naturally critical people. We're always looking for the weaknesses in things to help our customers get strength through those things. So we're always focusing on the weaknesses, and sometimes it can lead us to be not 100% balanced. So that's something.
I agree, and I think that I think everyone knows my politics. There was something early on in the presidency that upset me to a degree that I was like, I don't understand the other side. I don't understand. And I remember thinking for a moment, I didn't do it. I remember in my anger thinking that I was going to write on my Facebook, anyone who supports this man can unfriend me now. I never did. I've seen people do it. And I'm glad I didn't, because we're talking about 50% of Americans. It's almost like the Avenger movie where Thanos goes like that and kills half the population. I just as soon not kill half the population from my,
Rick,
he didn't kill them. He just made them disappear.
If they're invisible,
your point, though, in keeping it in healthcare, unfortunately, because of the Ebola crisis of a few years back, the Obama administration put in place a pandemic response unit in the White House. But when Trump became president, he eliminated that entire office and fired all of those people. It would have been really nice if we had that capability sitting in the White House, but we don't. We are relying on a number of different agencies, all of whom have their own turf battles between the CDC and the FDA and so on. And it would be best to have somebody who was running all of that who was nonpartisan, because this is not a partisan issue. But right now we have the vice president, but in fact the vice president is somewhat conflicts with, is it Azar? And as well, the president himself feels compelled to say things. So it's a very mixed message at the top right now, and that is a problem.
Well, and I think also the media pollutes the conversation. So, they seem to be focused on dividing. So there's not really an honest conversation in the public. It'd be nice at least if there's an honest conversation. And the thing about, without getting too far into politics, it's not just one party versus the next. It's populism versus the establishment. So we're kind of an upheaval. If you recall correctly, Trump was really a populist, not a Republican. The Republicans hated him, the media hated him, and the Democrats hated him. But he still got elected. So he's not the Republicans of a decade ago. But we have a different battle going on. But the media doesn't help, I think, regardless of your political persuasion. The media divides people and creates more conflict and polarization. And I think that makes it hard for people to have really objective, measured, decision processes.
I don't think it's a matter of, I'm obviously not part of US politics, but I follow and I see many similarities between what is happening in the US and what is happening in Israel, including the 50% of the population issue and popularism. But I think that on the one hand, we live in a society where everything is open and all information is public. But on the other hand, because of social media, not only the popular press, they're showing us only information that we want to see. Meaning Facebook if you believe in something, this is what Facebook will show you. And then you'll think that this is what the entire world thinks. And obviously wrong. And with the media, fake news media, etc., it really depends on what you believe in. If you if you identify with CNN or with Fox or with anything else. I mean, that's so. So what is the truth? I think it's mainly to look at the data, and then there's the interpretation of the data. And when you look at the data, for instance, in China, there was an amazing article. I don't know who published it a couple of days ago in Medium, and he basically showed that the Chinese really early in the game, whether you believe them or not, really issued the lockdown for 18 million people. And the graphs really went up 2 weeks later, but then they started going down the charts. So this is what they're saying, that it should be done everywhere, like a lockdown of a few weeks. You'll see it go up, but eventually, because there's no socialization, I mean, people won't be meeting each other, you'll see it start going down in terms of the virus. It's probably, I didn't think that in the past, but I'm starting to think that this is the way to go, because the economy is in, stock market and economy, business is in shit. So why let it bleed for that much longer? Maybe we should just like cut it out, and afterwards deal with the consequences. I don't know. That's what it sounds. What are you planning to do in terms of your businesses? Are you just like cutting down? Many of us are like, solo entrepreneurs, etc. We're not running companies with many employees. I mean, it's just like in terms of overhead, it's whatever there is. Are you pushing on the same as before, or are you just saying, okay, let's just wait this out and see what happens in a few weeks' time? I mean, we talked about strategy.
In essence, this is the question I asked the great big group last week, because I don't know how to do anything but react. I mean, Ed made a kind observation that this premium service, I've always enjoyed our calls, and I just wrote a comment publicly. I needed today's call. This is, in a moment's time going to be our longest call ever. And we didn't actually talk about anything that was like on the agenda. I just needed to talk with people I respect about how I'm feeling about what's happening to our business, the industry. I don't know that I'm going to leave the call any more prepared to forge forward. But I think just as a human community, we need to stay connected. This is a way to do it. And like I said earlier, I think that this whole thing is going to hasten our adoption of technologies in many aspects of life. Usually, and I did today, just as I always do, I take a snapshot of the call and I remind everyone who's not on the call the value of these calls. And I wrote that coronavirus hastens the move to online meetings like the ones we hold weekly here. Now I am certain this is the service the industry needs. Because, I had a couple people write me, in an attempt to, help and soothe my fractured income view now that I may have to completely cancel 10X, which will be a hit, especially if I have to pay a penalty on top of it. And a couple people said, Joe, why don't you look into making it a virtual event? And I said, the whole point of 10X is that we are virtual all year long. And I said, if we can't hug one another, why hold the event at all? I mean, I know it's a standard deviation away from every other meeting, but it's frankly the reason I hold it. Yes, I'm that desperate for affection that I have people pay to come and hug me. But honestly, it's like until we commune like that, and if this is our 6 feet of distance to do it, I'll take your virtual hugs because, it can be very isolating. Andre, I mean, you have an office full of people. How do you guys feel? Don't you feel boxed in?
Well, I tell you, it's my responsibility because I carry the lives of 34 families on my back every day. And as far as I'm concerned, and in relation to Chen, we are forging ahead and doing what we have to do, finding alternatives where we have to, and we're not gonna bow to the panic that everything's around us. Now, we may be fighting against the tide, but nevertheless, I'm not giving up. I'm pushing forward because not only my family, but 33 other families rely on what we do in this building. So
What's the average age of your employee?
We've got somebody that's in their 70s, right down to a bunch of millennials that work for us in the engineering department.
But if you were to like draw like I get my mean.
I would say in the 50s.
So I mean, if one person tests positive, are you going to let the septuagenarian come to work?
No, absolutely not. We've already discussed that. Just to let you know, to make sure, we do have a company, so we produced our own material for everybody. 75% alcohol with aloe vera. We distribute it to everybody. We have everybody doing their wash ups and so forth. And we do have a policy that if anybody even has a cold, they're not to come in. So we're doing what we can internally. We're being cautious, but we're not being crazy.
One thing too, I thought Chen, Andre, Joe, kind of combining something. Chen, when you were talking, the thing that I was thinking of is, I've got customers that I'm actively taking care of now. I mentioned to Joe that I had something hung up in China. It's finally grinding to a start. That's good, but it is affecting me economically. But I also have to figure out how I'm going to, and I thought taking something, Chen, you were saying is, how do we turn this around and shape the conversation with our customers? Because on one hand, we've got very few unknown unknowns, but we've got some known unknowns. The things about the virus that we just don't, that haven't played out in the United States yet, where we've gotten to collect data, and we haven't had enough testing to where we can know certain things. And I will tell you, the way number one, and Joe, nothing against you bringing this up at all, but with my customers, I never, ever, ever bring up politics, because I let them do it, which I know you do too. This is just us. But the way I work with my customers is a lot the way we're doing it in the churches. We're being sensitive to everybody's sensibilities. In other words, we're doing a lot more virtual stuff for those people who feel that they really can't show up in a crowd. We're doing that. We're of course modifying the way we greet each other and shake hands for those who do want to do it. I'm an usher in my local congregation. We're basically, everybody has a variety of approaches that they're taking to this. And so what we're trying to do is, and Andre, I heard it reflected in things you were saying, we're just trying to be sensitive to everybody's take on it. We're definitely not telling them what to think or what to believe about it, but we're trying to provide resources and interfaces that match up to wherever they're coming from. And I mean, that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing in the churches. I'm in touch with my brother's church in Cleveland, and people have so many different ideas about what's going on, what the danger level is, and of course, their age affects it and everything else. And so with my customers, I'm just trying to do the things that we can do remotely. And I'm still at a young enough age so that, my level of worry is very small, but I don't want to get it, because what if I run into somebody who's much older? And so I'm trying to take every single precaution, and every time they come out with a new one, I'm integrating that into it. And I'm listening to the international stuff and things like that, so that it's just like I do with my data management, is I try to make sure that I'm getting all this stuff. And what I'm trying to do is shape that into my conversations with my customers. I'm literally just looking at where they are. It's kind of like our churches are doing with the congregations. We're looking at where they are, where their sensibilities are, where their feelings are, what their level of anxiety is, and we're trying to provide for them at that level. And so as a
thing that I heard yesterday was that the Archdiocese of Seattle canceled mass.
Rome
Yeah, we
too.
just had that.
Mass on Sunday.
Our archdiocese in Newark, New Jersey canceled it for the whole northern part of New Jersey.
It's like, I mean, I know it's somewhat irrelevant what the religious calendar is, but just the notion of it during Lent, no mass.
Exactly.
Joe, they shut down synagogues, and even they told nobody come to the Wailing Wall, to the western wall of the temple. I mean, that's the holiest of the holiest. They said, don't come. Have you seen Vatican lately?
Yeah.
No one there.
But I think the imams are doing it too. I think they're,
Yeah, Mecca, etc. Yeah, they're doing it. Yeah.
The only thing that, Joe, I have to say, the only thing that is a surprise to me is that when we had the H1N1, which had 10 times the deaths and 10 times the impact, there was none of this. And it's such a contrast to what happened during the H1N1.
I don't remember it really being a thing. It was like,
That's because it wasn't on the news every day, but it was definitely here.
I don't remember. I mean, I don't remember what that was highly contagious, but I
What
don't
was the
remember.
R0
It's a form of the
I
flu.
got it.
Check out the statistics of H1N1, and you'll be surprised at the comparison.
12,000 people died for one thing in the United States alone.
Just U.S.
Yeah, it's just us.
And
12,000.
it was not the lead story on the news, not even one night.
Yeah, it's almost hard for me to like draw the parallel.
Well, that's a tremendous dichotomy that we have with the reporting on this one.
When was
That
it?
by design.
There was a story on CBS this morning. The doctor, I forget his name, but he's one of the people out front standing next to the president, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, and someone asked him specifically about the H1N1, and he made the point that that was a strain of the flu. And he said, we know what's going to happen with the flu in April every single year. And he said, it's going to go away. And by May, it's gone. He said, we don't know what's going to happen with this. And that's what's driving the difference.
The known unknowns.
Yes, the unknown unknowns. Yes, that's
not the unknown unknowns, but the areas where we know, we don't know. We've got like maybe half a dozen categories where we don't have data yet. We don't really have, we don't have data on the spread. We don't have data on the actual number of fatalities per 100. All these things, all the most important things are still, we had like a nearly 2-month blackout out of China where we didn't really hear a lot of what was going on. And so we're having to fill in all of the information and it's kind of like I was with a plant move and the people who were moving it lost the gauge book, which for anyone who's in quality is like, oh my God, we don't know where any of our gauge calibration is. We don't know what we've been measuring. We have no history. So they physically lost the book and we had to rewrite it. We had to recalibrate. We had to redo everything. And so we're doing two things. Number one, we're recalibrating all our data. But number two, we're responding as a nation and as a globe, just as the body responds to a virus. We are trying to buy time to where we can, as the body develops tools to fight virtually any virus that it's exposed to, you have to do it before the patient dies. And so what we're trying to do is limit exposure so that we can develop vaccines. As a nation, we're responding exactly the way the body does. We are buying time.
Friends, as your host, I'm taking an administrative decision here. I'm going to stop the recording. But for those among us who feel the need to stay on the line, stay on as long as you like, because I know that we need to kind of talk about this, but I also recognize that an hour and a half is about as long as any of us can reasonably afford to lose out, to spend in our day on a conversation like this. So just stopping the recording, but we can continue.